A new study out found that there is no state in the United States where a worker can survive on anything less than $14 an hour, even while working a full week. A new study out by the Alliance for a Just Society says that there is no state in the United States where a worker can survive on less than $14 an hour. Now, this study was done, as I said, for the Alliance for a Just Society. That's an economic advocacy group. They released a report on Tuesday that found that there are 2 states where workers would have to work more than 100 hours to be able to afford things like food, housing, and childcare. Now, I want to break down a few of the states and how many hours a person would have to work in these states to actually make enough to survive. In Hawaii has a really high standard of living. So in Hawaii, where the minimum wage is about $7.75 an hour, a person would have to work 110.7 hours a week to survive. Now, Hawaii has a large homeless population. Now, based on the standard of living and how much money you actually need to survive, I'm not exactly surprised, and neither should you be. You shouldn't be surprised that there are so many people living in desperate poverty. When 40 hours a week working is not even near enough, it's not even half the amount of hours you need to work just to be able to survive on your own. It shouldn't be a surprise. Well, what about other states? Virginia. Virginia has the $7.25, the federal minimum wage. In Virginia, workers have to spend 103.2 hours a week at their job at minimum wage just to be able to make it. Ooh. Maryland, New Hampshire, New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania, in those 4 states, employees have to work more than 90 hours a week just to make ends meet. So it's not just New York, it's not just LA. There are a lot of places all around America where you just cannot make it on minimum wage. Now, Allyson Fredericksen, who's a policy analyst at the Alliance for a Just Society and an author of the report, said everywhere across the country needs an increase in the minimum wage. There's nowhere that the minimum wage allows you to really make ends meet. Now, the researchers also found that there is no state where a single person can comfortably live for less than $14 an hour. For a family of 4, however, that shoots up to $17.85 per person, both parents. As a matter of fact, in 35 states, the minimum wage must be raised to $15 an hour in order for it to be a living wage, where it should be. Now, a lot of conservatives will say, yeah, but this minimum wage you were never meant to live on this. You were supposed to be in poverty in order to boot you, in order to kick your ass into something better. Not exactly true. In 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, made a speech in favor of instituting living wages. Not more than 5 years after this speech, they instituted the federal minimum wage, which actually brought a lot of workers out of poverty. Now, this speech, quote, "No business which depends for existence on paying less than living wages to its workers has any right to continue in this country." Basically, if you can't afford the cost of business, maybe you're doing business wrong. I know, right? I thought we lived in a free market. Well, if the free market actually can't pay its workers enough to survive, then why should the worker work for you? Why should you even be around if you depend on government subsidies to survive? Your business model sucks, and you should not exist. Simple as that. Now, he continues, by business, I mean the whole of commerce as well as the whole of industry. And by workers, I mean all workers. The white-collar class as well as the men in overalls. And by living wages, I mean more than a bare subsistence levels. I mean the wages of decent living. Now, of course we don't believe in that anymore as a country, because we're not doing that anymore as a country, despite the fact that Americans, conservatives and liberals, both want the same thing. We both want higher wages. In fact, In the midterms, where Democrats in 2014 got shellacked, got destroyed, annihilated, in conservative states, Mark Pryor, there was I can't remember her name. I can't. She was that inconsequential. Allyson Grimes. In Kentucky, where Allyson Grimes was running as a kind of Democrat, right? She's Democrat in name only, loved coal, wouldn't even admit that she voted for Obama. In places like that, in Arkansas, we saw state initiatives to raise the minimum wage pass overwhelmingly. This is not a liberal or conservative issue. This is an issue of, hey, if you work for a living, you should be able to survive on the money that you earn. Instead, what we do, instead of paying people enough to live without government subsidy, we instead subsidize corporations by allowing them to get away with paying poverty wages, starvation wages. They pay so little that middle-class taxpayers have to foot the bill for people's Medicaid and food stamps. Things that people need to survive. Remember, if they're working, and many of them do, the vast majority of people on food stamps and on welfare programs, they work. But they just don't earn enough to survive on their own. So they have to have these programs. But the one way, if you really want to do away with these programs, which even I do, but there has to be a way for people to survive without these programs. And that's a higher minimum wage. You could get rid of welfare as we know it if you give people enough money through working to survive. And we don't do that. Now, the Republicans say that Democrats love giving out freebies, right? But under conservative policies, under conservative economic policies, the conditions that require these different welfare programs to actually have to exist, to be created and maintained. If you want to reduce welfare, you have to make work mean something. You have to make it worth it by actually paying people enough to where they can survive. That's what people want. People want to be able to live on their labor. That's what you're supposed to do. And nobody making $15 an hour is living like a king, by the way. They're not living extravagantly. Okay? All it is that it's enough to pay your bills and do what you got to do to go through life and afford the basics without having big government come to and have to subsidize you. And that is the whole point, after all, of having a minimum wage. If we didn't have a minimum wage, we would have a race to the bottom. And we see this in countries that don't have the minimum wage, or that have a very, very, very small minimum wage. And what we see in those countries as a result of that is an impoverished underclass that is permanent. And this underclass gets exploited by large multinational corporations in order to pad their bottom line. And these corporations, thanks to free trade, can sell stuff to other countries at low enough prices to kill off jobs in that other country and destroy their competition. That's the race to the bottom. That's the problem. So we don't need just a higher minimum wage. We need more than just that. We need strong unions. And we need good trade policy. Not fair trade, not free trade, but fair trade. Good trade policy that actually protects American workers and that actually works to stop the exploitation of these permanent underclasses in other countries and helps American workers and revives a middle class, creates a strong, vibrant middle class full of people who are consumers, who have enough money to live without needing the government help. What we want is a minimum wage that allows us to create economic growth and opportunity. And magic fairy dust is not going to do it. The magic fairy dust of trickle-down economics doesn't work. It's time we do something different. And how do we do that? It's simple. We fight for it. We fight and fight and fight and fight until we win.